Okay, hello everybody. You guys probably all know me. I'm the officials coordinator for your tournaments and stuff like that. Another year of Navasatian, so we're excited to be here. We have a new coach that's coming here. Every year we have a Division I coach that comes and talks to you guys and gives you guys pointers and a little motivational stuff to get you guys going. I met Russell this year for the first time. He's the new UC Irvine coach, and the thing that struck me the most about him was that his energy on the floor. And I just told a story to Joe Perone over there. Us as officials, we see the outside in of this whole thing, but we can tell when something's wrong in a team. And I was at a couple of places where you go in and we have to go in and get them out of the huddle. But you can tell that there was something wrong going on there and this and that, and the players weren't listening to the coach, and they're disgruntled, and they get on the floor, and you can hear them talking to each other, and they're just either cussing at the coach or whatever the case may be, and then the coach is sometimes gone the next year. And it's unfortunate, and it's an emotional thing for them, and that's why I know Russell and I want to talk about all that stuff later on, but like I said, the one thing that struck me about him was that his energy level, when he got there, and I did his first game that I got assigned to, and it just transferred over to the kids, and the kids played a lot harder. And so when we started talking about this coaching clinic, I said, I think he would be a great asset to this coaching clinic because of his energy and his experience. He spent 6 years in the NBA as an assistant coach with the Golden State Warriors. And anytime you can work for that type of league for that long, I mean, that's a good thing. You learn a lot and stuff like that. And just like I learned a lot working for them as an officials observer. But anyway, I know it's Sunday, so I'm not going to keep you any longer. I want to introduce Russell Turner. He is the head men's basketball coach at UC Irvine.
Okay. Thank you guys for having me here. It's a real pleasure to get to speak to such a large group. I'm really impressed with the commitment that this group has to its youth and its adult basketball. And that's why I'm here. When Martin told me that we wanted to get together as coaches and talk about some strategies that might allow you guys more comfort in order to be more effective with your groups, I feel like that's right down my alley. As he mentioned, I was a 6-year assistant coach in the NBA, and I'll tell you real quickly, the hardest thing about coaching in the NBA is referee and practice. So I've got an incredible respect for the referees at every level, because when you're an NBA coach, you have to ref and practice, and you hear those guys and they're the best in the world, and it's really, really difficult. But I don't want you to think that my experience is just from the NBA. I've spent a number of years coaching in college. This was my first year as the head coach at UC Irvine. We had a good year, but not a great year. Prior to my NBA experience, I was an assistant coach with Mike Montgomery at Stanford University. And Mike, of course, is the head coach at Cal now. He's had incredible success throughout his college run. I learned a tremendous amount there. While I was there, I ran the camps. And each summer we had over 1,000 young kids, ages 6 through 16, who came through camp. And my job when I ran the camps was to work with the coaches. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Prior to the time I was at Stanford, I was at Wake Forest University, where I did the same thing. I was an assistant coach from 1994 to 2000. It was a great time to be there because we had a guy named Tim Duncan. And we won a lot of games because we had a guy like him. And one of the things I always tell my camp coaches is that when I was coaching at Wake, there was this 7-year-old kid that was in camp, and he wouldn't leave camp. When camp would close, he was there. And he stayed around. His parents picked him up late, and he was the first one there the next morning. And little did we know the impact as coaches we were having on this kid. His name's Chris Paul. And he grew up in Winston-Salem. There was another young man who came to our camp every year who was a couple of years older than Chris. His name was Josh Howard. And Josh Howard and Chris Paul, both from Winston-Salem, they were youth kids that we worked with as college coaches in camp. 2 guys who ended up being NBA All-Stars. So it's incredible the opportunity that all of you have as coaches to work with young people. You never know who's going to be there soaking in the energy, the enthusiasm that you bring. It's incredibly important to me to be here, especially for the youth coaches. And if you're wondering why, right there. I got 2 young youth players right there that are starting to get recruited, I believe. My little boy Darius. Darius, raise your hand, buddy. Darius, raise your hand. He's 4. He's got the ball. Yeah, give him a hand. That's my little guy. And my daughter, Devlin. Raise your hand, Devlin. She's 6. But the opportunity, that you have to work with young people is incredible. It's going to be interesting for me as these two start to be coached by other people, to watch that, to experience that. I'm sure you all know, all of you have kids. The first couple things that I want to talk about probably has more to do with coaching young kids than anything, but I think it's also true coaching anybody. And that's these things. Martin mentioned that the energy that I have, I think translated to my team this year at UC Irvine. These kids are 18 to 22 years old. I think that's the first thing that you ought to think about as a coach. How can you bring positive energy every day that you interact with your team? Okay, and that's not easy when most of the time you're going to be with teams who are going to struggle in a lot of games. So your mentality, your approach to the times that you struggle with your team, the way you transfer positive energy to your team, that's the most important thing about being an effective coach. I'll tell you a couple of stories that I think can illustrate this point. When I was a young guy, I grew up in Virginia. You might hear my southern accent. When I was a young guy, all that I remember about playing youth sports is the coaches. That's all I really remember. I don't much remember my teammates. I don't much remember how much we won. We did win a lot, but I remember so much about my coaches. And that's what I told everybody in the camps that I've worked with at Stanford, at Wake Forest, and now at Irvine. Most players' experience with their team, how they feel about their team, is going to come down to how they feel about their coach. And I want you to think about that real quickly in your own experience, because that's probably true in many cases for you. If you're lucky, you're going to feel good about the guy or the guy or the woman who's coaching you. You're going to feel good about the fact that they came every day and gave a great effort. They came every day with a plan. They came every day and didn't waste your time. And all that stuff is true whether you're coaching 6-year-olds or you're coaching in the NBA. It's still the same. I just finished, I just came from the NBA, as I said. None of those things that I mentioned are any different at the highest level of basketball or at the lowest level of basketball. I want to talk about practice planning just briefly, and then what I hope to do is open this up to questions, because I know there's a wide range of coaching out here, and there are probably a lot of different things that people are curious about. So what I'm hoping is we can get something interactive going, where you're asking questions and I'm giving things back, and we've got some players out here who might be able to demonstrate. The next thing I'll say that I think that you should really take note of, in addition to your energy level, to your enthusiasm, it's this: keep your coaching as simple as possible. As simple as possible. The old rule, you've probably all heard this, KISS, K-I-S-S. Keep it simple, stupid. I think there's nothing more important in coaching this game at any level, in any sport, than to make things clear for your team and then be simple with your expectations. All of you, I'm sure, have seen frustrated coaches on the sideline, guys who get angry at their team. And I think that's the last thing you ever want to be as a coach. What you want to do is you want to set clear expectations, try to put guys in position, players in position where they can meet your expectations, and then hopefully you'll have success. But if you don't have success winning and losing games, I think you can have success in having clear expectations. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a funny example first. When I was in junior high school, I played for a coach, and he wanted to win so bad. He was one of these guys that probably made more news for his behavior on the sideline than anything. He worked hard at it, and he wanted to be good. And we were a really good high school team, our junior high school team. We had 2 plays. All right, we had 2 plays for our team. And I won't bother telling you what they were, but they were real similar plays. And he got upset because our team wasn't having much success, and he felt like the other teams knew what we were going to do. So he decided one day that we were going to trick them. And one of our plays, we weren't going to call it with the number 1 and the number 2 anymore. He decided that we were going to call the play number 1 by saying any fruit. So if he said apple or banana, then we would all know that it was play number 1. And if he said any color, red, purple, green, we were going to run play number 2. Well, what do you think happened the first time we did this in the game? Yeah, the point guard came down the court and he said, orange, 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 and we had everybody going in a different direction. And I used that to illustrate the point that you're better off keeping things really simple, because that was a great idea, we're going to trick people, but it didn't really work out. And that's an obvious example, but there's a million of them. And I had to remind myself that this year, coming from the NBA, there's a lot more technical stuff that goes on, believe it or not, at the highest level than there is any other. And one of the things I had to remind myself over and over this season, let's keep things as simple as possible, all right? I'll talk about that as it relates to offensive and defensive philosophies just for a second before we get into questions. I'll talk about defense first because I think that as a coach, what you should recognize at any level, 6-year-olds to older guys, is your opportunity to affect games, all right? The opportunity you have to influence what happens on the court is far more possible when it comes to defense than it is to offense. Why do you think that is? What's that? Well, defense wins. Ever since Michael Jordan said defense wins championships, I think everybody's kind of latched onto that. You see it at every level. But the reason I want to focus everyone now, if you're thinking about coaching basketball, I want to focus you on defense, is that most coaches think it's the plays they run. It's the way they can manipulate players on offense to look in control that, gives them the most energy, makes them feel like they're doing the best job. The truth is, though, you can dictate what happens on the floor with your defense far more than with your offense. And I think you should think about that, at every level. Okay, so what I mean by that is if you can teach your team through man-to-man defense or zone defense or trapping defense, aggressive defense versus pack the paint defense, you can control what happens on the defensive side of the ball far more than you can control what happens on the offensive side of the ball. So when you're thinking about how you're going to put your team together, how you're going to get them to play together, think about the defensive side first. Okay, I always say that in camp. When you're in camp, you've got a week. You got a week to coach these guys. You got a week to get them to play. Always focus on defense far more than offense. Okay, and I'll talk about the two widely different defensive philosophies that I think you got to start with thinking about if you're a basketball coach. What's your defensive style going to be? Okay, in my mind, there's two distinct defensive styles that you can try to employ at any level, and what you've got to come up with is how you're going to build your expectations for your players around one of these styles or around a hybrid style like this. And the two defensive styles, in my opinion, are these. Are you going to be a pack the paint, protect your basket defensive team where 5 guys are playing against the basketball? I think that's one philosophy. 5 guys against the ball, pack the paint, protect your basket. All right, that can be one set of priorities on the defensive side. And there are a number of different ways you can do it, either with man defense, zone defense, anything like that. But I think that's where you got to start as a coach and figure out what sort of style that you're hoping to employ with your group. Pack the paint, defend the ball with 5 guys. That's one side of it. The other side of it is we're going to be an aggressive, turnover-creating team that attacks the ball with pressure, with denial out on the wings. We're going to be a team that takes chances, goes after people. Well, what you're